talk about, try to connect that to the effect it has on the audience, right? So in evaluating whether or not something is effective in a rhetorical analysis paper, we really need to be constantly showing the impact certain strategies have on the audience and why they're effective. And you need to also identify the purpose for why these strategies are recruited. So what was the intention behind the decision-making to use a particular strategy? So you might like to think, well, you know, if this particular TED Talk had used a lot more logos than pathos, would it have been effective? So some weak examples. So this is an example of a thesis statement that needs some work. Her approach is largely effective because of how she understands her audience, as well as her use of pathos, ethos, and logos. So again, this is like vague, and as I talked about, we don't want this like shopping list type of thesis statements. So really try to choose just maybe 2 appeals and talk about them in a more specific way, ideally not even naming them, but really making sure that I understand what you're talking about as your reader. Another example, King's letter is incredibly interesting to read. So this is opinion and it's not analysis. It might indeed be interesting, but here it doesn't talk about the specific appeals or any of those 5 elements that we just talked about. I don't get a sense of what the argument is, so there's no argument either. And here's another example. King's letter explains why white moderates' position is untenable. So again, this is like, there's no real argument or analysis here. It's a summary. It's engaging with the writer's argument, but it's not making, the student isn't making their own argument about the rhetorical appeals. And here's another one. King's letter employs ethos, logos, and pathos to urge white moderates that the time for protest is now. So again, this is list-like. It's really broad. I'm not getting a sense of, you know, the purpose behind these particular specific appeals. And it's just really too broad. It's not going to be a sophisticated paper when it's looking at all these different appeals and not engaging with them in a complex way in the thesis statement. So here are some stronger examples. So in his essay, Nguyen establishes American responsibility for the Vietnamese refugee crisis and credibly disputes the discrimination levied against refugees. He also invokes his family's experience fleeing the Vietnam War, emotionally persuading readers to sympathize with those forcibly displaced from their homelands. Using these rhetorical strategies, Nguyen urges the US to be more inclusive towards refugees. So this is good that I get a sense that this author is going to be looking at pathos. So this author is arguing that the writer draws on their own experiences to make sure that the readers have a sense of empathy for refugees. So I'm getting a strong sense of pathos. They also talk about credibly disputing the discrimination levied against refugees. So I'm probably guessing that there's logos going to be analysed as well. In the second example, we've got Young investigates the historical context for the stay-at-home phenomenon, suggests persuasively that the only opinions being heard by society are from the margins of the population, and establishes his own connection to the term to effectively inform the audience as well as call them to action in eradicating the marginalisation of mothers who make the choice to stay at home. So here I get a sense that the student is going to be exploring the appeal of logos. So they're talking about kind of evidence-based techniques, historical context. That sounds like evidence is going to be used. And this suggestion that the only opinions being heard by society are from the margins of the population. So it sounds like it's going to be very much an argument based on the rational or the sense of the logical. The second part of the thesis statement sounds like the writer is going to be drawing on their own personal experience and in a way that builds them up as a credible source, so ethos. So establishes his own connection to the term to effectively inform the audience. So that sounds very much like the author is going to be drawing on their own experience. So here the student points to 2 techniques that the author is using, the writer that they're analysing. Sounds very much like ethos and logos. And we're going to be talking in a different screencast lecture about body paragraphs. They need to match up to your thesis statement. So I will be talking about that. It's important to keep in mind, though, sometimes when we write our introduction thesis statement and then go on to write the rest of the paper, our opinions can change or we start to notice something else that's more interesting. So it's really important at the end of your paper that you go back and reread it, make sure that your thesis statement argument is matching up with what you're arguing in your body paragraph and in your conclusion. So head over to Canvas to complete the in-class activities and please email me if you've got any questions.